Welcome to the LSU NCBRT Preparedness Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Markle. I am a curriculum development specialist here at NCBRT, and I work in collaboration with subject matter experts to create valuable and timely training for the responder community. The National Center for Biomedical Research and Training provides mobile training to both the national and international emergency response community. Welcome back to the podcast. With the 2024 election just days away, we wanted to catch up with Tina Barton and Justin Smith about the efforts that are going into making this upcoming election as safe and secure as possible. So if you haven't already listened to our first series with them, go ahead and head back to episodes 74 and 75, and we'll meet you back here. So to start us off today, I just want to go ahead and have you introduce yourselves. So Tina, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us again. Tina Barton. I am a senior election expert with the elections group. I'm also vice chair of the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections. I am a former election official from the state of Michigan, where I served for 32 years, working in government at the city, township, county, and ultimately ending my career in government at the federal level, working as a senior program advisor to the U.S. Election Assistance Commission.
All right. Thank you. Justin?
Hi, Justin Smith. I'm a retired three-term sheriff out of Larimer County, Colorado, just a little bit north of Denver. I'm an election safety expert and have 35 years of law enforcement experience before retiring from law enforcement and stepping into helping the election safety arena.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So to start us off, Tina, when we last spoke, you told us about the threat that you received after the 2020 election. And if for our listeners, if you haven't listened to the first part of this series, our first two episodes, we actually have the recording of the threat in there. So go ahead and head back to that. It's crazy. But can you refresh our memories on what happened and give us an update on that case?
Sure. Thank you. So I'll just kind of a quick recap. In the November 2020 election cycle, I received a death threat voicemail from an individual from the state of Indiana. I didn't know that that's where he was from at that time. Came into my office the week after the election and had a voicemail on my phone saying things that, like, when I least expected it, that they would kill me, lots of foul language, lots of sexualized language, basically saying things like not only F my life, but F my family, all of those sorts of horrible things in a voicemail. I went about 3 years, did not know who the individual was, and knew that it was being investigated by the FBI. In August of last year, he was brought to the Detroit federal court and was arraigned there in the federal courthouse. Again, mentioning he's from Indiana. I'm in Michigan. This became an FBI DOJ case because of crossing state lines and the fact that he used a phone to make the threat. In February of this year, he was back in the federal court system here in Detroit, and he pled guilty to the charges. In July of this year, was back. I went down with my family and some friends and gave a victim impact statement before the judge. He was sentenced to 14 months in prison. If you listen to the voicemail, he specifically states in there that I should be sent to the Terre Haute Penitentiary. If there's any upside to this for me, it's that he was sentenced to Terre Haute, to the penitentiary. So that's where he is serving his 14 months of prison time, and he began his 14 months of prison in September. So just a few weeks ago, he reported. So he is currently serving a 14-month sentence.
Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry that happened, but glad that, justice is being served and hopefully that can give you some peace of mind moving forward as much as possible. So thank you
Thank
for giving
you.
us an update on that. So as we look ahead to the next couple of weeks, I think it's 2 weeks from today that we're recording this, but when this is uploaded, it'll be very close to the election. Have the types of potential threats changed at all since we last talked?
Uh, I would say that they have evolved, certainly. I know, Sheriff, if you want to jump in, but just, from some of the things that we're seeing, and I'm sure that maybe I'll forget some if he wants to jump in, but lots of unknown substances being sent through the mail. There have been over 20 instances of that in just the last year. Some of that has tested positive for fentanyl. One that just this last week was Dutchess County, New York elections office that was temporarily shut down after receiving a suspicious substance. They reported it to be crystal meth. We've also seen an uptick in swatting, not only, of statewide election officials, but some of their staff members, hearing from law enforcement just in general that swatting instances are happening frequently across the country, even to those non-election related. We had just in the last couple of weeks where we saw the FBI arrested a man who was planning a terror attack on election day. And we've already had an instance here in the state of Michigan where inaccurate information was sent out via text in order to confuse voters. So I would say that those are just some of the things. Sheriff, I'll let you hit on some things too.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on that, when Tina and I really started this education process out there just about 2 years ago, we saw the general threats that had occurred before, the harassment type, the physical threats. But what we saw over probably the first 6 to 9 months was about every month there was some new version, there was some new threat picture out there. That pace has certainly picked up to include all the threats that Tina's talking about. And we're seeing that continue, and the frequency is out there to the point that we went from every month or two to it seemed like almost weekly, daily. And I hate to say it, but the information that Tina and I cull through on a daily basis, there's certainly days when there's multiple things that are occurring. Much as we deal with other threats that are out there in our schools, to our schools, we see they evolve every time something occurs, and we're certainly seeing that in the elections arena. And part of this is that the individuals, there's the copycat mentality. Somebody sees something's done, and they'll do it, and they'll do it a little bit different. But the fact that what's unique in our elections threat picture is that there's a lot of foreign actors involved. That really ramps that up. And Tina made a reference to essentially the AI, the generative AI. We're keeping up with where technology is. That's going to continue to evolve. And from the last time we talked, we may have spoken of AI, and if we did, it was still very crude. But the concern is just how quickly that's becoming to the point that it's hard for the average individual that maybe sees a quick clip that comes out to differentiate, where 6 to 9 months ago it was pretty easy to tell the difference. So we certainly have those things going on, and to the extreme, and Tina touched on it. We're always careful when we're having the conversations and we're forecasting that we don't want to be seen or feel like we're being alarmist. That will turn a lot of folks off. And so we had been careful that the scenarios that we talked about in the threat environment didn't come across as a sky is falling sort of a situation. However, just a little over a week ago, when the FBI announces an indictment for an individual who actually was in the process of planning a terrorist attack on a voting location, that's probably to the far end of the extreme threats that are out there. So we're addressing those type of things, working to prepare elections officials, election workers, and prepare voters for some of that potential, but at the same time, being cautious, because if we overreact, if we create such a fear that people are discouraged, from working elections or voting, then, the opposition has our opponents on us have won. So it's a really interesting balance, but it's evolving on a daily basis now.
So, can you explain some of the key initiatives or exercises that have been implemented to ensure, security going into this election?
I would certainly say that we have created resources that we think that are helpful, especially the quick reference guides. We now have them for all 50 states that have election laws for each of those states where law enforcement can reference particular election situations to see if there's a law that covers that. And I know that the sheriff can speak more as to why that's important. We certainly also have put forth time and money in creating videos that are helpful, law enforcement type training videos, as well as PSA videos, lots of resources related to things like crisis communications, de-escalation, all of these resources hoping to empower election officials, not only for themselves and their teams, their families, but also for the poll workers that they can use in training, memorandums of understanding between them and law enforcement, where they can agree on what the expectations are for each of them and what they will do and what they can provide on election day, to resources on ballot drop box security, ways that they can make sure that those are secure, as well as a checklist for them, for election officials, specifically related to combating swatting attempts. That's something that even the term and phrase talking about swatting is sometimes foreign to our election official audience when we talk about that. Some of them are familiar with it, some of them are not. So making sure that they have a checklist, which every election official loves a good checklist, in their hands to go through and to really, like I said, empower them and make them feel that they at least have something in their hands that can help them either mitigate a situation or maybe even eliminate a situation from happening.
And I would just comment on that we're trying to fill the niche out here is being solutions based. We're sharing the information and giving that current threat picture when we go out and do our trainings. But what we don't want to do is just throw the fear out there and say, here's the things to be scared of. We want to talk to what Tina's referencing, the guides that are helpful. Here's information you can use. And what's really important to us is that what we're putting out is meant to be flexible, to be used within the laws of any of the 50 states and the territories as well, and used for your local purposes. And it's about those conversations and finding how these kind of guides help out. And again, like the swatting guides, we're not going to stop some of these things from occurring, but what we can successfully do is give law enforcement elections officials the tools to mitigate the impact, because if these individuals don't have the opportunity to have the negative impact, it reduces their motivation to be out there. The other thing I'll point out is there's some things that are long distance out there. We talk to elections staff and their financing folks about what it is to, in the future, have purpose designed election spaces. Let's be honest, traditionally elections oftentimes ends up in what's somebody's leftover space. It's a combined, office that was there and maybe some warehouse space, and wasn't designed for the process, wasn't designed for the technology and security. So that's one of those that we're working for elections folks to look in the future as to what that looks like. But that doesn't help for an election that's in that year or a few months out or now a few weeks. But it's some small things, the things that anybody can do to improve, putting some signage up, basic security of the facilities, some basic cameras, and setting up those relationships, sharing phone numbers and that type of stuff. So anywhere that somebody is, I would say on the spectrum for safe elections, we have tools that can help them move that forward, for the immediate, and also give them mid and long-term goals and a roadmap to get there.
Thank you. So we touched on this a little bit. From the law enforcement perspective, what are some of those unique challenges that law enforcement will face in this election, and what has training looked like to address these challenges?
So I'll point out that what's challenging is the scenarios we're talking about. I would offer for law enforcement shouldn't be something new they've never dealt with. Any one of these things is happening in society, or mostly is the AI is probably the new one that we're seeing come in.
Sure.
But it's applying it to elections. And some of the things that make it unique are the issues of the First Amendment aspect. When law enforcement responds to an elections location, there needs to be some very intentional discussion ahead of time of, what the line looks like on the difference between somebody exercising their First Amendment right to dissent and, maybe what they have to say or what they're doing may not be popular, but there's a difference between that and something that's disrupting an election process or something that might be disenfranchising a voter. So that's a unique aspect for law enforcement responding is to understand some of those key issues. And we even have the conversation with local police that they may roll upon a situation where they have an individual who can be arrested, but that individual maybe hasn't voted yet. And a police officer is not even going to think of the aspect that an election official is, that even if the person, is having issues, there needs to be very intentional thought of whether that individual is being disenfranchised. And obviously, if there's a safety issue, law enforcement needs to take the actions that they take. But those aspects that are certainly unique, as well as issues where law enforcement, there's very few places in society that a police officer is restricted from being in a public space. But in most states, there are specific statutes that talk about the presence of a police officer, and certainly a uniformed police officer, at or near voting locations. So that's a very unique aspect. And that's part of what drives that critical conversation between the elections experts, the election officials, and law enforcement. And these also require that ahead of time, there's conversations between the attorney that represents both elections and law enforcement on civil matters and prosecutors, so that any of these things that could be reasonably anticipated as being a little challenging are discussions that are had ahead of time, so that it's not the rookie police officer who's put on the spot with this. If we can anticipate some of these issues, we can give them the tools, we can have the conversations that allow them to be better prepared and make sure that they're fulfilling what it is that elections needs. And a unique aspect of this, and then I'll wrap this up, is that normally law enforcement gets involved when a crime has been committed. However, in the elections process, we need to shift our mindset a little bit to recognizing that at times we're going to be called upon by the elections officials, not because a crime has been committed, but because the election process needs to be protected, and to shift into that mindset that we're the ones to provide that level of protection when it's requested.
Thank you. So what are some of the key concerns or challenges you anticipate once the votes are in, and how are you preparing for potential disruptions or unrest from people who may be unhappy with the results?
Well, certainly, I mean, there are battleground states out there that people will be watching, that their eyes are going to be on them. Some of those states have taken steps since the last presidential cycle to add things like pre-processing of absentee ballots so that results will come in at a faster pace than what they did in 2020. So some measures have been taken there, but not all states have done that. And so there's certainly concern that there could be either late results coming in, there could be human error that would be involved in situations that could delay results or possibly even change the results between election day and certification during that canvas time period. So the delay in results could cause people to maybe gather in those places where we're still waiting for results, like what you saw in Detroit, what you saw in Maricopa County, possibly what we could see in states like Pennsylvania this upcoming election cycle, where they may gather in large groups, waiting for that, and recognizing that when you have people that are on both sides of the aisle who feel passionately about the outcome, having them all gathered in the same space could certainly lead to demonstrations, possible protests that could expand beyond just their constitutional rights, to then infringing on the safety and security of the workers in the building, as well as possible destruction of the property. So we have scenarios built around those types of things. If there were to be any types of protests or demonstrations, specifically after Election Day, related to the results either being delayed or the fact that, somebody's got to win and somebody's going to lose, and somebody's not going to be happy about that, regardless of which party it is. And I think that there's, data out there and there is research out there that shows that this is not just a one party issue, that we could see and should be prepared that no matter who wins or loses, that we could see some sort of uprising or demonstrations. And so that's something, especially in the larger cities or larger counties, that we've tried to focus on as part of the scenario planning.
Thank you. So to kind of wrap up our conversation today, what are some of the biggest lessons learned in election security over the past year, and how optimistic are you about the future of secure elections in the U.S.?
On the lessons learned, I think it's the value of partnerships and relationships that we're seeing some great advancements. And I'll let Tina address kind of what that long-term outlook, but as we're traveling around the country and we're hearing the stories, as we're bringing up, some of these best practices, I personally see more and more often that the participants in our exercises will start out with, okay, we've already had some conversations. We've talked about these things. We're doing the preparation. And I think that's the part that's the real key to this is in the vast majority of jurisdictions, the knowledge, the expertise is probably there. You just have to come together, have a conversation. 2020 is a country, I would simply say we were caught flat-footed because there were a lot of different things going on. And it was reasonable for individuals involved on the public safety, law enforcement side and the election side to offer up. They really hadn't thought about these issues impacting elections. But I can tell you there's a lot more going on. And we're seeing a lot better preparation. It's just a matter of making sure that the jurisdictions out there, because we have thousands, it's localized, our elections are localized, that everybody is prepared as they can be, and that we take the opportunity at this election to also look at lessons learned, not simply go, hey, we made it, we made it past November, we made it past January. We cannot rest on our laurels. And I think a good piece of this is there's a recognition that planning for election safety is like any other planning in the community. If you have a 4th of July festival, you have a parade, you have fireworks, the people involved come together and plan the safety aspects of it. And I think this has been a turning point that we're seeing this in public safety. I know that the law enforcement associations that I communicate with on a daily or weekly basis, they're working to plan for this with their members and finding folks very open. So I think from that standpoint, there's a lot better preparation and plans put together to address even, there's going to be more complicated things come at us, but being prepared. And in the communication aspect of that, crisis communication is now a part of this. And I just know we're in a better place. I'll let Tina talk about kind of where she sees this going now.
Yeah, as far as the lessons learned, I think certainly a lot of what the sheriff had to say is the relationship building has been huge. The cooperation and the collaboration together, all the way from the federal level down to the local level, recognizing that no one group is going to solve this problem or be the solution on their own, and that we all need each other. And so I think that there has been an opening in that arena. So I think that has been helpful. You've had CISA, who has created the election security advisors regionally, who's gone out and they're able to do these site assessments now. I think there's also been education for election officials, that there are a lot of resources out there and a lot of groups that do want to help, like the Committee for Safe and Secure Elections. And for some of them, just learning that even CISA had the ability to do these site assessments. So I think we've all kind of, when you're desperate, or you feel that you're in a situation maybe that you don't know the way out, we're a lot more open to conversations than we are before that, when we feel comfortable in the space that we're in. Excuse me. So I think this has certainly opened up those conversations. I would also say that I'm hopeful that we have seen more training than we've ever seen in elections the last 4 years. We've seen more transparency than we've ever seen in the last 4 years. I also think the American public is standing up and saying, this is America and political violence is not acceptable here. This is not the way we run our elections. We are not a, third world country. We have rules, we have laws, and we have a constitution, and we abide by those laws. And so I think that there has certainly been a revelation for all of us of where we're at in the moment, and really the responsibility that we each have to respond, whether that's from the election officials' response, the law enforcement, but also the American public. We all have a role to play in this. And so I'm hopeful that 2020 was just an ugly time in our history. And I'm hoping that we have put a lot more plans in place, put more measures in place, secured more things than we've ever secured, trained more than we've ever trained. And I'm hoping that as we go through these next few weeks and even into the next few months, all the way through inauguration, that we will show that, yes, that was an ugly time, but we've learned a lot of lessons and we're coming out better for it. And we're moving forward in a better way too.
Thank you. Well, that was just a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me for this update. And yeah, I hope the next couple of weeks and the next few months go smoothly and we don't have a repeat of what happened last time. So thank you so much for joining us.
If not, we'll be back next time for another update.
Oh, goodness.